All right, so our next speaker is proof positive that truth really is treason in an academic faculty of lies. Professor Michael Rectenwald is a former professor of global studies and liberal studies, author of Springtime for Snowflakes, the Google Archipelago, and most recently, Thought Criminal. And he's also someone that I really admire for his acts of courage to go against the grain at great personal cost to himself. So please give it up for Professor Michael Rectenwald.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. This is my hometown. I'm actually a Pittsburgher. I have that in common with Ron Paul. That's our, you know, I grew up on the north side of Pittsburgh in a very Germanic, authoritarian family. And, you know, so it was only a matter of time before I became a Marxist. Yeah, Anthony really made this kind of difficult for me because he's a jokester and he talked all this soft shit. Now I'm going to go up here and talk about totalitarianism. I'm going to take that up with you, Anthony, soon. Anthony's my therapist. So anyway, to get a little bit more serious, no, that was great, Anthony. Thank you. We'll talk about it later. So anyway, this piece is called An Historical Juncture Demanding Human Action, which seems to be every moment, but this one is in particular the case. So the most pressing matter facing advocates of liberty today is the prospect of the political and economic establishment completing the institution of a totalitarian state. Sorry to throw cold water on you there. It gets better, don't worry. There is no other way to read this multi-pronged approach and the political maneuverings that the political operatives are taking to rule under Biden. And I put Biden in quotation marks because the current president of the United States is not Joe Biden, but rather a Politburo that is consisting a Politburo consisting of party rulers and advisors ruling by executive fiat, and in conjunction with, as I'll talk about here, corporate state apparatuses. Make no mistake, the power grab that these people are intent upon undertaking is a threat to human liberty in our moment. The signals could not be any clearer. In addition to the swath of executive orders, clearly composed by the Politburo members and aimed at extending federal power, the political establishment has initiated a growing body of laws which would, if passed, consolidate uniparty rule for the foreseeable future. But the most imperiling sign of the nearing consolidation of totalitarian government is the effective merger of corporate and state functionaries. With corporations and other organizations acting as political appendages of the government and enforcing corporate state desiderata. The indications of this merger are so many and sundry that an exhaustive recounting of them would take a book-length treatment. A book-length treatment that I will endeavor to write. The most conspicuous example of the corporate-state merger, of course, is the extension of the governmental power to corporations and other organizations with the COVID crisis response measures, which may now exceed lockdowns and masking to include the issuance of the vaccine passport that may be required. Now, the prospects for these vaccine passports may actually have been increased by the announcement of the new rule issued by Biden's people after the CDC's advice that mask mandates may be lifted for those who've taken the vaccine. Already the COVID authoritarians, however, are suggesting that without vaccine passports, there will be no way to tell who should and who need not wear a mask. Although the vaccinated will be allowed to go without masks, many have indicated they will continue to wear them so as not to lose the opportunity of signaling their virtue, their compliance, and their authoritarian druthers, while making the unmasked appear as deviationists. The old saw that such corporations are private companies and that libertarians must support their right to do whatever they want does not hold water, because clearly these corporate bodies have been enrolled as state apparatuses. Operation Warp Speed was rolled out by the federal government under Trump and has listed private organizations and foremost Big Pharma to execute it. The state has enabled Big Pharma to profit enormously by instituting a state of emergency regime, which in the US makes non-FDA approved vaccines legal. At the same time, Big Pharma, along with WHO, the CDC, and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, legitimizes the state of emergency regime, which in turn augments state power. The enrollment of corporations and other organizations in the scheme to vaccinate the population and require such vaccinations for social participation should not be considered in terms of the prerogatives of private organizations, but as part of the infiltration of the state into private industry and vice versa. What we are witnessing and should be resisting is a merger into a corporate state complex wherein government can bypass the legislative branch and enforce unpopular mandates by colluding with corporations and other organizations to make policy. The state exceeds the reaches of the government per se. It includes these corporate apparatuses. Furthermore, those who deploy masks and enforce their use may be considered state agents in their own right. Like major corporations, these individuals have been effectively deputized by the state to enforce state sanctions. Perhaps the most egregious element of this corporate state stranglehold is the participation of what I call big digital, the major media and social media platforms, along with the primary information control and search organization, Google. I have called this set of digital giants the Google Archipelago. Big digital conglomerates eliminate media outlets and voices that challenge the official narratives and disappear dissidents, just like the Gulag Archipelago, except not corporal, not yet. The official narratives include the COVID narrative about lockdowns, maskings, and vaccinations, although it has changed willy-nilly and been proven factually wrong, as well as socially devastating. Big digital and the media serve the state in general, and big pharma in particular, by eliminating oppositional views. And they disseminate propaganda on a 24/7 basis. As I have written in Google Archipelago, big digital must be considered an agent of an authoritarian state, as a governmentality or state apparatus functioning on the part of and as part of the state itself. Now, governmentality is a term that should become well known amongst libertarians. Michel Foucault, the postmodern theorist, did something right by using this term governmentality to refer to the distribution of state power to the population or the transmission of governance to the governed. Foucault referred to the means by which the populace comes to govern itself as it adopts and personalizes the imperatives of the state, or how the governed adopt the mentality desired by the government, governmentality. One might point to masking and social distancing as instances of what Foucault meant by his notion of governmentality. I adopted the term governmentality, having amended it to refer to corporations and other non-governmental actors who actively undertake state functions, including the individual on the street. As Jeff Dice has suggested to me by email, sorry, but Jeff, if I'm disclosing too much. Big digital tech companies, quote, demonstrate the idea of nothing outside the state, which means nothing is truly private. To me, he continues, the civil in civil society means wholly private, the part of society which is totally outside and apart from the state. That's what we need to expand. Our civil rights precede the state and thus lie outside its political control. The state's only dubious justification is to help secure those rights. So is Google part of civil society? Absolutely not. End quote. Thanks, Jeff. As political agents, big digital corporations are state agents, period. Similarly, other major corporations now perform state-sanctioned roles by echoing and enforcing state-approved ideologies, policies, and politics, indoctrinating employees with critical race theory, issuing woke advertisements, policing the opinions of workers, firing dissidents, and soon possibly demanding vaccine passports from employees and customers. So the overall tendency then has been toward this corporate state monopolization over all aspects of life, with the increasing control approved by principles over information, opinion, economic production, and the political sphere. If the consolidation accelerates, and I hope it doesn't, the broad state, which includes these corporate appendages, will require the elimination of non-compliant, disaffected, and untrustworthy economic political actors, using in part environmental, social, and governance scores to direct resources to approved producers and distributors. And with the elimination of political opposition at the federal level, the tendency is toward uniparty rule, and with it, the merging of party and state into a singular organ. That should sound familiar. That's what happened in the Soviet Union and China. Some refer to this configuration as fascism. And on the economic level, it is fascism, at least at the top. But as we all know, it is coupled by Marxist socialist rhetoric and ideology on the ground, replete with totalitarian social control vis-a-vis high-tech surveillance under the pretense of medical necessity. I call it corporate socialism, with a corporate state ruling elite tending toward monopoly on top and actually existing socialism for everyone else. Now, actually existing socialism is a pejorative term used mostly by dissidents in socialist countries to refer to what life was really like under socialism, rather than in the perfidious books of Marx and his epigons. Corporate socialism is not merely government bailouts for corporations. It is a two-tiered system of actually existing socialism, paralleled by a set of corporate monopolies on top. Now, if you're at all familiar with the corporate and billionaire funding sources behind, say, Black Lives Matter and other groups, you'll probably wonder, or have wondered, just what are these capitalists doing supporting a movement whose doctrine is apparently antithetical to their interests? Aren't these funders capitalists after all? And don't capitalists naturally oppose socialism? The answer is that monopolists are more than happy to spread socialist ideology amongst the masses, because in doing so, they prepare the population for this corporate socialist regime. They thereby help to eliminate competition and likewise consolidate their monopolistic grip on the economy. Even some leftists have come to the same conclusion as I have about the current configuration. The Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben has acknowledged this pernicious new amalgamation of corporatism and socialism, calling it by the name of communist capitalism. Agamben writes, and take his use of the word capitalism with a grain of salt, because what he's referring to is corporatism and not free market economics. Quote, the capitalism that is consolidating on a planetary scale is not capitalism in the form it took in the West. It is rather capitalism in its communist variant, which combined with an extremely rapid development of production with a totalitarian political regime, This is the historical significance of the leading role that China is assuming, not only in the economy, but also, as the political use of the pandemic has eloquently shown, as a paradigm for human governance. That the regimes established in the self-styled communist countries were a particular form of capitalism, state capitalism, as you'd say, especially suited to economically backward countries, and therefore classified as state capitalism, was perfectly known to those who can read history. It was quite unexpected that this form of capitalism, which seemed to have exhausted its task and therefore became obsolete, was destined to become, in a technologically updated configuration, the dominant principle in the current phase of globalized capitalism. It is possible, in fact, that we are today witnessing a conflict between Western capitalism, which coexisted with the rule of law and bourgeois democracies, and the new communist capitalism, from which the latter seems to emerge victorious. What is certain, however, is that the new regime will unite itself in the most inhuman aspect of capitalism, corporatism, with the most atrocious one of statist communism, combining the extreme alienation of relations between men, as Marxists always put it, with the unprecedented social control. That's the bad news. Nevertheless, lest I be the bearer of only bad news, we are beginning to see chinks in the armor. Chinks in the armor of woke COVID, corporate socialist totalitarianism. I mean, if that isn't enough, woke COVID, corporate socialist totalitarianism. For example, even the New York Times has actually reported a COVID fact. They have acknowledged that there has not been a single recorded case of outdoor COVID transmission. Wow. Furthermore, numerous retailers are lifting their mask mandates. Despite the attempts of the Branch Covidians to seize the opportunity for the vaccine passport, the elements of tyranny are beginning to crumble. Mainstream propaganda outlets will soon have to show the light of day regarding science, actual science. A recent study conducted by the Salk Institute and actually acknowledged by the CDC shows that the spike protein, for example, the very protein that the vaccine prompts the cells to produce, poses a danger to the epithelium of the vascular system, notwithstanding all its other actions. Other studies will come forth soon. Mainstream propaganda outlets will be forced to acknowledge the utter uselessness of mask mandates and lockdowns, facts which have been so adeptly and relentlessly demonstrated by Tom Woods. Thank you, Tom. This is not to mention, though, the social and economic devastation that these draconian measures have precipitated. Meanwhile, broader swaths of the population are becoming aware and wary of this regime as worldwide protests of the lockdowns proliferate. As Michael Heiss has suggested, this attempted and floundering totalitarianism represents an important opportunity for the Libertarian Party. This is our opportunity, and in particular for the Mises Caucus. As the standard bearers of liberty, the Mises contingent represents a beacon for real resistance. Its very existence and recent growth means that the totalitarian state is incomplete. The Mises Caucus has a rare opportunity at this historical juncture, thanks to the political establishment's declaration of war against liberty, reasoned debate, and economic literacy. How can we exploit this opportunity? Number one, by consistently standing against COVID tyranny, the Mises Caucus can show that there is a principled opposition to lockdowns, masks, and forced vaccinations. By offering a principled stance against the collectivist ideologies that infringe individual rights and self-determination, the Mises Caucus can attract those disaffected by the hegemonic ideological environment in which we find ourselves, woketopia. This involves treating people first and always as individuals, not as members of weaponized identity groups used to achieve political ends. And we must show why such individualism is far superior, including for minorities, by consistently imposing the endless wars and advocating the non-aggression principle, both politically and personally. We show that the free market can and must be decoupled from imperialism, a decoupling that the left believes to be impossible. We don't, we disagree. By consistently opposing the imprisonment of those charged with victimless crimes, like our comedian here tonight, the Mises Caucus proves that it cares for individuals, including those in the worst circumstances. By defending property rights, beginning with the property of one's person, the Mises Caucus demonstrates that property rights are absolutely required for individual liberty. By representing economic sanity and clearly demonstrating that private property and free exchange are the basis for economic flourishing, the Mises Caucus debunks the belief that socialism is best for achieving social welfare. By consistently opposing statist corporatism and corporate bailouts, the Mises Caucus shows that it favors free markets and not the rigged marketing and political entrepreneurship of the establishment. Finally, by standing for individual rights and individual liberty under all circumstances, the Mises Caucus can lead the way out of the tyranny that besets us. That's our mission. And as I said, as a native Pittsburgher, I am proud to share the birthplace with Ron Paul. I am proud to be a Ron Paul / Lou Rockwell libertarian. But as many of you may know, this was not always the case. You may know from my memoir, Springtime for Snowflakes, or from my appearances on the Tom's Wood Show, that I am a former Marxist. I came to libertarianism first as a civil libertarian and then as an Austrian school economic libertarian after I saw the totalitarian character of the social justice movement and subsequently of socialism itself. I soon read Mises and relished his demolition of Marxism. So I'm here to say finally that if someone like me can be converted to libertarianism, then the opportunities for attracting defectors from across the political spectrum, including former socialists, they are endless. They're endless. There's an endless line of them, yes. As I've said, you know, the left eats itself, but not fast enough. I anticipate that more defectors will be joining our ranks as the totalitarianism unfolds and unravels. I urge you to be on the lookout for them and to welcome them into our community like you have me. Thank you very much.